What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'm going to be going over 10 players that I think you guys should be looking to buy low on after week 1 of the NFL. It was super exciting week 1. Obviously, we learned a lot after the first week of the NFL. There are a lot of things that really come to light that we necessarily didn't know after the whole preseason, after all of training camp, and it's really useful to take that information with us and make sure that we both apply that information that was given to us in week 1 and then also don't overreact and don't be somebody that, trades away superstars that had really bad weeks. And we want to be those teams that go to teams and other fantasy managers that had underperformers that we don't expect to continue to perform that way. And we want to grab those guys that came away from week 1 with a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth, the guys that we really do expect to bounce back. So trading is one of my favorite things to do in fantasy football. It's definitely the way that I think is the easiest and most effective way to improve your fantasy roster over the course of the season. Obviously, there's waivers and all that as well, but trading's super fun. It's one of my favorite parts about fantasy, and I personally take that shotgun approach in fantasy football. I just make as many trades as I can, knowing that I believe in myself to win more than half of those trades, and over the course of the entire season, I believe it's going to make my team a lot better. So it's a lot of fun for me doing this. It really helps me to sort of just apply these sort of players to my leagues as well. You'll see me make trade offers for pretty much all these players that I'm going to talk about here, and certainly advice I'm taking to my own leagues and something that I think you guys should do as well. So yeah, a lot of fun, and yeah, with that, let's just get into the first player here. So starting us off, I'm going to start off with the quarterback position. My number one buy low at the quarterback position would be Josh Allen. He's coming off of just an absolutely brutal performance in Week 1. He had 4 turnovers and lost to the Aaron Rodgers list New York Jets on Monday Night Football. A primetime game where you underperform is really one of the easiest ways to find an opportunity to capitalize on buying a player low. You'll have fantasy managers that just watch that game. They'll be all upset about maybe he lost them their week. Maybe they needed a good performance out of him to win, and it didn't happen on Monday. If he's all over Twitter, people are bashing on Josh Allen, and obviously that just brings a whole lot of bad vibes around that whole situation. But let's be honest, this is Josh Allen. He played really poorly against the Jets both times they played each other last season, and that's just something that happened again this year. Josh Allen was still a top 3 quarterback in fantasy football last season, and he's still going to be a top 3 quarterback over the course of the rest of the season. The upcoming schedule for the Buffalo Bills is much better. They play the Raiders this week. That's not a very good defense. Then they play the Commanders, Dolphins, and Jaguars. 3 good offenses in there. The Commanders are still sort of TBD, and 4 defenses that you're not scared of at all. I think you could see the Bills in a lot more shootouts going forward, and Josh Allen's going to be just fine going forward. On top of that, the Bills really didn't play their starters all that much in the preseason. They had like 1 or 2 drives. Not something that I'd be really worried about at all. I doubt Josh Allen's going to come cheap because obviously the person that drafted him got him in the late 2nd or early 3rd round in your league, but I think if you package a mid-tier quarterback, maybe package like a Lamar Jackson and then a decent like low-end starting player, it could be something that could get the job done. So you just throw offers around, see what you can do. I think he's a guy that I certainly want on my roster, a guy that I really think is going to help you guys win fantasy championships this year, and this is probably the cheapest he'll be all season. Next up, we've got another quarterback, another one of those top 3 quarterbacks I think you can buy low on right now, and that's going to be Jalen Hurts. The Eagles' offense was just simply not good on Sunday. They didn't play at all over the entire course of the preseason, and they had a pick 6 really early in this game. They got up 17-0 really early, and when that happens, you sort of see these offenses take their foot off the gas. That just overall led to a very poor performance for Jalen Hurts and really the entire offense in general. On top of that, the Patriots are an elite defense, and the weather in this game was quite bad. It just really wasn't an environment where we would expect to see a lot of production from Eagles players, and I'm just not worried at all about it. It's the first week of the season, and a season where they didn't play players in the training camp or in preseason. No reason to really expect them to really have come out rolling on all cylinders, given they've just got to sort of shake that rust off. They should be good to go come to week 2. They play the Minnesota Vikings on Thursday Night Football. That's probably going to be a shootout in this one. I think we did see some honestly promising signs that we did see that this Eagles defense is vulnerable, which actually is really good for Jalen Hurts in the offense because they're actually probably going to give up a lot more points this season than they did last year. We should see more games going forward where they actually have to put up points over the entire course of a game rather than just winning it in the first half, and I think that's going to open up an even greater ceiling for Jalen Hurts in this offense than what we saw last year, and I'm actually really excited about what I saw despite the fact that this last week didn't go great. So Jalen Hurts is my quarterback 1 over the projected over the rest of the season. I'm definitely targeting him in all the leagues I don't have him, and I know that it's probably not going to come cheap either, but he's just somebody that I definitely kick the tires on and see if you can make something happen there. So the last quarterback on this list is someone that's going to come obviously a lot cheaper than the first 2 guys I talked about. That's going to be Anthony Richardson. I think that Anthony Richardson's obviously going to come to you guys for pretty cheap, but I really do love what I saw out of Anthony Richardson and this Colts offense in week 1. They weren't great by any means, but they also weren't bad. And honestly, that's all we're really looking for with Anthony Richardson, because my main concern with him was that he would be a super inefficient passer. This team wouldn't be able to move the ball, and it'd be a situation where you're just looking at one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And we really didn't see that this last week. They finished 9th in total offensive plays, and Richardson had 10 carries in this one, and obviously the more plays you run on offense, the better suited you are going to be to scoring fantasy points. We saw them be one of the fastest paced teams in the preseason, and that carrying over to the regular season is really promising. If they run more plays, they've got more opportunities to score for fantasy, and that's obviously what we really want to see. And 10 carries is absolutely fantastic. I don't think he can really sustain that over the course of the entire season, but I think you could see a scenario where he gets like around 100 carries this season, maybe a little bit more, and he obviously rushed for a touchdown in this one as well. I think he could easily add 1,000 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns on top of whatever he does through the air. And he actually looked decent through the air as well. He had one bad interception, but he completed 65% of his passes, had over 200 passing yards through a touchdown to Michael Pittman. And honestly, this offense just looked pretty good. I do think that Anthony Richardson has a legitimate shot to be a fringe top 5 quarterback the rest of the season. And I think that means that he's a guy that you can actually just confidently start going forward. They play the Texans in week 2, and that's not somebody that really scares me as well. You can play him assuming he's healthy enough to go. And I think he's just going to be really solid. If you don't have an elite quarterback, he's definitely somebody that I think you guys should be targeting, and a guy that, like I said, he's going to come pretty cheap, and I think he could be a weekly starter for everyone the rest of the season. Next up, we've got the first running back on this list, and that's going to be Jamir Gibbs for me. Obviously, the usage wasn't what we want to see out of a high-end draft capital player, given that he only had 8 touches in week 1, but I think that's something that should have come as an expectation, honestly, going into week 1. Dan Campbell was really upfront with us as a fantasy community and really everybody about how they wanted to ease Jamir Gibbs into things. They were going on the road against the defending champs. They didn't want to have any rookie mistakes, and they really leaned on David Montgomery in that one, and I still think David Montgomery actually played really well and will be the guy that probably out-touches Jamir Gibbs over the course of the rest of the season, but on the touches Jamir Gibbs did get, he looked legitimately elite. He had, I want to say, 7 broken tackles on 6 carries. That is absolutely elite. He looked fantastic in the passing game as well. Was super fast. He had 1 carry inside the 10-yard line where he cut outside, would have easily beat the defender to the end zone. He just sort of tripped up under his own feet. If he scored a touchdown in that one, obviously he'd be having a much different fantasy outlook going into week 2. And the Lions were also just able to keep the Chiefs offense held down without Travis Kelce on the field. The Lions also scored defensively on a pick 6. And when those things happen, when you don't give up very many points on defense and you score on defense, it really puts you in a spot where the offense doesn't have to do very much. That just limits the overall production of the entire offense. And that's something that I would expect to really go for, not continue going forward. The Lions are a team that's going to have to score a lot of points if they want to compete, and I think that they have the offense to do that, and Jamir Gibbs is going to be a big part of that. I think going forward, Jamir Gibbs should see closer to 15 touches a week over the course of the rest of the season. He should be much more involved in the passing game as well, given that he only had 2 targets in week 1. I would expect to see closer to 5 targets a game going forward, and that's going to give him a really safe floor. I think he's going to have a couple explosive runs, a couple big plays, and be a really nice guy to have as your running back 2. He's probably not going to finish as a high-end running back 1 this season, but I do think he can be like a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2, and if the fantasy manager that owns Jamir Gibbs is going to overreact after week 1, I would definitely be targeting him as somebody that I want to have on my roster. Next up, we've got another high-end running back, and that's going to be Nick Chubb. Obviously, Nick Chubb is going to come at a really high price tag, given that he was drafted at the end of the first round, likely, and honestly had a relatively good game in week 1. He didn't score in this one, and he lost a lot of carries to Jerome Ford at the end of the game once they got up enough that Jerome Ford could really come in. The Browns didn't have to worry about any risk of losing this game to the Bengals, and despite all of that, he still finished with, as the RB10 in PPR formats, he had over 100 rushing yards, and he caught 4 passes, and that's the really encouraging part, is that this is really what we wanted to see out of Nick Chubb. That was the whole theory behind why Nick Chubb could finish as the running back 1 in fantasy, and that was because he was going to be an extremely efficient rusher on the ground, which he was. He had 5.9 yards per carry. He was going to score a lot of touchdowns, and I still think that's going to come, even though it didn't come in week 1. This Browns offense looked relatively decent. They moved the ball pretty well in a game that just had really brutal weather. That was a really low-scoring game in general, and the Browns looked a lot better than the Bengals in this one. And on top of that, if he's going to catch 4 passes a week, which I think is a bit of a stretch, but if he can catch 2 to 3 a week even, that's going to give him a much higher floor than what he's had in the past, give him a much higher ceiling as well, and I really think the ceiling's just set up there for Nick Chubb to finish the season as a top 3 running back. I absolutely love having Nick Chubb on my rosters. He's a guy that I want to have in any format, a guy that I think can be the running back 1 over the course of the rest of the season, and I think this honestly might be the cheapest he's going to come all season, so I would absolutely be targeting him right now. I believe the Browns played the Steelers in week 2, who just allowed Christian McCaffrey to go off and be the running back 1 in fantasy this last week. I don't know if the Steelers' run defense is any good. Maybe their entire defense isn't even that good outside of TJ Watt. So Nick Chubb could easily have a blow-up game in week 2, and I want to make sure that I get him on my roster before he truly blows up and shows that RB1 upside. So the next running back that I'd be targeting in trades this week is going to be Miles Sanders. After not playing or practicing really most of the entire offseason dealing with a hamstring injury, Sanders came in week 1 and saw 24 total opportunities. He had 6 targets and 18 carries, finished with around 100 yards in this one, and that's just absolutely elite usage. Getting that many touches in a game as a running back where you lost by 14, only put 10 points on the board, that is just really encouraging for a team that I expect to score a little bit more over the course of the season. I think you could see plenty more scoring opportunities for Miles Sanders. On top of that, This offense is obviously going to be bad, but the usage is so elite that he's going to be a running back one in weeks where he scores. He's catching enough passes that he's going to have a much safer floor than what we saw in his weeks in Philadelphia last season, where he really wasn't utilized in the passing game at all. And we know he's a capable pass catcher as well. He's been good in his career when he's given that opportunity, and I really do think that's going to be there for him the rest of the season. On top of that, we did see Chuba Hubbard actually be relatively involved in this one. I think a lot of that had to do with just Miles Sanders really not being completely 100% coming off of that injury. I would expect even more of the workload to shift over to Miles Sanders once he's fully ramped up and just really in football shape. And on top of that, this offense should only get better over the course of the season as Bryce Young gets more comfortable in the offense. Things sort of progress for him in his career, and that's going to open up a lot of opportunity for Miles Sanders to score more, get more yards, just have more total offensive plays, and just a lot to be really encouraged about for Miles Sanders right now. And I really do believe that Miles Sanders is the top 15 running back over the course of the rest of the season. And even though he had an okay performance in week one, I think a lot of fantasy managers are just a little bit underwhelmed. They saw him fumble in this one. He didn't score a touchdown. I think he had for pretty cheap right now, and he's definitely someone that I'd be targeting if he's available. Another running back buy low for me right now is going to be James Conner. James Conner was second in the NFL in running back snap share, just finishing behind Christian McCaffrey. He was on the field for 84% of the Cardinals' offensive snaps. He also ranked as PFF's best runner in week one. He had 2 broken tackles in this one on 14 carries. He had a couple runs over 10 yards, and he just looked really good with the ball in his hands. On top of that, he was extremely involved in the passing game. He caught 5 passes, and I really do believe this offense is only going to get better as the season goes on. Joshua Dobbs should get a little bit more comfortable in the offense. It should look a little bit better than what it did in week one. Obviously, Joshua Dobbs coming over from Cleveland about 2 weeks before the start of the NFL season doesn't put him in a great spot to come out and perform at a high level. And on top of that, Kyler Murray could return after week 4. If that happens, this offense should get much, much better than what it was in week 1. On top of that, I think James Conner is actually going to be relatively easy to acquire. He finishes the running back 21 in week 1. Not something that's super exciting. He had 13 PPR fantasy points in a week where he had 5 catches. If he's in a half PPR or a non-PPR scoring format, he obviously had a much worse performance. And I think he should just be a lot better than what he was this last week. I think the scoring opportunities will come for him. That much usage is just going to be hard for him to finish anywhere below running back 2. He's a super safe guy to have on your roster, and I don't think he's being valued very highly right now. He's somebody that I definitely want to have on my roster if I didn't get him in drafts already. Next, I've got probably the most obvious buy low on the entire list, and that's going to be T. Higgins. There have just been sort of bad vibes surrounding T. Higgins for the last week or so. When the Joe Burrow contract was announced, the 5-year, $275 million deal for Burrow, reports came out of Cincinnati that they really just weren't invested in T. Higgins as the future of the offense, not a guy that they really want to sign to a long-term deal. And on top of that, then he came out on Sunday and laid a 0-catch game. Obviously, that doesn't put up very many fantasy points. He laid a goose egg there, but there's really no reason to be concerned for me. This entire Bengals offense looked absolutely brutal. It was a really poor weather game, really wet game, really rainy. Joe Burrow was coming off of his calf injury, hadn't practiced very much. I think we can pretty much just wipe the slate clean for the Bengals here. We know they're going to be a much better team than what they were on Sunday. This should be sort of a blip on the radar for their season. I don't think it's going to be anything that continues over the course of the rest of the season. And with that all being said, we still did see T. Higgins secure 8 targets. He had over 150 air yards. He was given 35% of the first read looks in this offense, and that means he's going to be plenty involved in the offense going forward over the course of the rest of the season. He's still an elite wide receiver. I think he's going to be a really high-end wide receiver too the rest of the way, and I don't think he's going to cost you all that much at this point. He's probably going to be viewed more as like a low-end wide receiver too. This is probably going to be the cheapest T. Higgins is at any point over the course of the rest of the season. If you don't have him on your roster, just send a couple trade offers out there, see what you can get. Maybe your fantasy managers in your league are smart about it and won't trade him, but I think there are going to be some fantasy managers that are panicking right now, and if they are, you can definitely target him as a buy low. Next up, we've got probably the only true buy high on this list, and that's going to be Zay Flowers, especially in PPR formats. I just think Zay Flowers is going to be a guy that I really want to get on my roster before he continues putting up the numbers that he did in week 1. He saw a 45.5% target share in week 1 and was given carries as well. He was extremely involved in the offense. He was effectively the focal point of the offense. They wanted to run this Ravens team and that offense through Zay Flowers. He saw 10 targets in this one. He's just a really good player. Every time he had the ball, it looked like he was ready to make several guys miss, and he just looked the part. He's a really talented player. He gets open in space. He makes guys miss when he has the ball, and he's someone that I really do want on my team. He's the clear wide receiver 1 in Baltimore, and the injury to Dobbins only makes it more obvious that this Ravens team is going to pass the ball much more this season than what they did in the past. They obviously played the Texans in this one. They didn't really need to put up too many points on offense, and they were missing Mark Andrews as well. Lamar Jackson looked really bad. I do expect this Ravens offense to get things going a little bit more when they get more comfortable in the new offense. They get Mark Andrews back, so even though you might see a bit of the target share drop, which obviously it's going to, Zay Flowers is not going to finish the season with a 45% target share. I think you could see a scenario where he has a 25% target share and gets a couple carries as well. And this could be a Ravens team that throws the ball 35, 40 times a game. That's going to make him like a 100, 150 target player. And given that, I think Zay Flowers could easily be a wide receiver 2 the rest of the season. He has upside beyond that if he could really break out, if this Ravens team can really take a step forward on offense. And I just really want to have Zay Flowers on my rosters. I think he's going to be a really elite fantasy asset the rest of the season. And if for whatever reason the fantasy manager on in your league has him, doesn't realize that already, you should definitely be trying to pay for him. I don't think he's being valued high enough yet. I think he's truly going to be potentially a league-winning draft pick where he was drafted, and he's somebody that I really want to get on my rosters right now. Next up, I've got Jahan Dotson on this one. He saw 7 targets in week 1, and they only turned that into 9 PPR fantasy points. This Commanders offense just really didn't look all that sharp in week 1. The Cardinals defense looked a little bit better than what I expected it to. They were able to generate quite a decent pass rush, and on top of that, the Commanders offense just really didn't need to put up that many points in the game against the Cardinals, who just really couldn't score. The Cardinals sort of played a really slow-paced game as well. It's just not a scenario where it was really conducive to a lot of fantasy points being scored for Dotson, but next week, they're going to play a Broncos offense that actually looked pretty good. I know they only scored 16 points, but it was done on 6 drives. Russ looked sharp, completed about 80% of his passes. I think this is going to be a team in the Broncos that can score on the Commanders next week. And with that being said, Dotson's obviously going to have to match, or in this Commanders offense, they're going to have to match and put up more points. The Broncos just gave up 29.1 PPR fantasy points to the wide receiver 2 in Las Vegas and Jacoby Myers. They obviously have Patrick Surtain as their cornerback 1. He's probably going to be shadowing Terry McLaurin in this one. That's going to open up a lot of opportunities for Jahan Dotson to abuse that second corner in Denver. I expect a big week coming from Jahan Dotson in week 2, and then going forward, I do think he's probably the wide receiver you want to own in Washington. I view him as like a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 the rest of the season, and I don't think he's going to cost you nearly that after what was a pretty underwhelming week 1 and a guy that I really do think is going to break out over the course of the season. Next up, we've got the only tight end on this list, and that's going to be Dallas Goedert. I'm going to throw this entire Eagles game out the window for me. It's just not something that I'm worried about at all. Last season in week 1, we saw Devonta Smith put up 0 fantasy points in week 1. I guess that's just a tradition for the Eagles now. They've got to put one of their 3 guys through a goose egg in week 1, and I'm just not worried about it at all. Goedert should have a great week in week 2 against the Minnesota Vikings, who are just not a very good defense at all. They just let the Buccaneers put up 20 points and lost to the Buccaneers in this one. It should be a much higher scoring game. Like I said earlier, I do believe this Eagles defense is taking a step back this season. The Eagles are going to have to score a lot of points to win games this year, and I really think they can do that, and Goedert's going to be a huge part of it. He's just a legitimately good tight end. I still view him as a top 4 tight end the rest of the season. A guy that I really want to have in my roster, and with the state of the tight end position after what we saw in week 1, where only one tight end had over 55 receiving yards, that's just a really bad spot to be in. Obviously, Dallas Goedert, I think, could be a difference maker for you guys, and he's someone that I want to get on my roster, and I don't think he's going to cost you all that much at this point. He's a guy that a lot of managers are probably going to be pretty upset with. So that'll do it for this week's Trade Targets video. Up next, the same video will come out today, this video will come out today as well. I'll be going over players I think you guys should be selling high on. Normally that video will be just one video each week. I'll condense it into a single video, but after week 1, there's a lot more movement, a lot more information that came in, so I wanted to split this into 2 videos so I could make sure that I got every single player that I wanted to talk about included. So make sure that you guys watch that video as well. If you want to make sure you guys do get that video, please do subscribe to the channel. It really helps grow the community. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving. We are over 800 subscribers at this point, which is really cool, and I'd love to hit 1,000 by the end of the NFL season. Let's see if we can do that. It'll be super cool. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving. If you guys want to support the channel even more, feel free to like the video as well if you haven't already. It really helps grow the channel. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. It helps know that I'm doing a good job. It helps know that you guys want more content like this as well. So yeah, today you'll be getting the sell high video. Tomorrow you guys will be getting the Thursday night breakdown. I'll go over all the players that I'm looking to start and sit on Thursday Night Football. And then Saturday morning you guys should get my complete game breakdowns of every single game, which players I'm looking to start and sit. And then on Sunday morning you guys will be getting my live stream where I'll go over injury news and then last minute start sit questions. So really appreciate all the support. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch the video. And with that, I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.